Welcome back, everyone. And yesterday we discussed how we can use uh, fetch API calls to make our React application dynamic and driven by real data, which is lying somewhere in the database. So let me share my screen and show what we were doing yesterday. So we were building this Pokemon search app where we had a default. We were showing the details for Ditto, and user could search something like uh, Pikachu. And you can spell Pikachu, right? And they would get the information for Pikachu. How did we get that information? Well, we were hitting an API, it's a Pokemon API, and we were sending the Pikachu as a payload to the uh, as a parameter to the API. APIs can take all kinds of parameters, and we will see them more in detail. This API is taking Pokemon name as a parameter. So this is the fixed URL for our API. And here at the end, you can imagine this having either Pikachu or Ditto or something like this whenever we call it. So if you look at the code, we have a very structured code where we are calling the API on line 14, then getting the response of the API, and then displaying the API, displaying the response of the API. There is, so this is a standard way of doing, but the more modern way, which is easy to read, is using something called uh, async await syntax. So this is a more modern JavaScript way of doing exact same thing, but why we prefer async await is it makes code more readable and it allows for putting the breakpoints easily. So we are going to see both of those parts, but how do you even start writing the async await call, async await code block? So async is something that will go to your function definition. So here we call we here we are defining. So if you look at our code, this much code is our function definition. If I had to extract it out for better readability, this is our function definition. So we wrap the entire function simply in async first, and then uh, we declare it just like we would create a new variable. We would uh, declaratively declare a variable. So we say const await, sorry, response. So we are defining a response variable directly is equal to await and then uh, your entire code block. So what does this do? So let's actually comment this code out for a second and look at this uh, as this console.log the response. So now if you see, we have replaced this entire thing with the console.log and Troy is not a function. that's fine. So we are getting our response here, and response has a status which is 200. So HTTP status 200 uh, actually represents that our API went through fine. And if you go to our network tab, we are still getting the same response. And response has something called a body, and response should have. Oh, course is here. Okay. Yeah, let's move this to oh, use effect doesn't like this, so we can't do this. So let's define a function const API call function equal to await or let's directly define a function where they are telling us. So this is a good example again, right? And we call the fetch data and it's so this is another pattern of how you call APIs directly like this. So let's look at what we got in response. Okay, to URL body. Response of data. Mission. This is the guy. Copy this. Uh, this this is probably lesser known way of doing this async await. Let's see if this works. Okay, this works. So we are able to extract exactly the similar. I don't think the second await is necessary. Oh, it's a promise actually, so it is necessary. So if you look at the what was printed on console, we did the similar stuff as this, and what we can simply do is Instead of response data, let's call it Pokemon. And then we can simply say Pokemon data is, and now we got back by doing the same amount of stuff, we got back our, uh, so this is if I comment this code for a comparison, it is much easier to read a code like this instead of going like this. And this is more modern way of doing things. And if you have to use async await, you have to do is put a await in front of your asynchronous operation. And what does this mean is calling the API is an asynchronous operation. What does asynchronous operation even mean? It's something which happens on its own timeline. It happens when it happens. You cannot control when API will finish responding your data. Maybe if you're on a Wi-Fi, it will be faster. If you're on your mobile data, or maybe let's say you're in mountains or woods, it will take time. So it will take its own sweet time to respond. So we need, so calling APIs using functions like fetch is always asynchronous operation, which does not follow a strict timeline. But by doing something like async await, we are writing code which is most easy to understand and human readable uh, in a structural sequential manner. Although it's not sequential, it's still the same thing. It is sequential, which you can sort of easily read. And also by doing this, you are able to put a breakpoint. So what breakpoint is nothing but stopping the uh, stopping the call at the instance when the API is getting called. Let's refresh this. Uh, Now I have stopped my code execution right where this async await call is happening. And by doing so, I'm sort of executing the code line by line or more line by line manner rather than going sort of asynchronous way of doing it. So this is our first part of what we wanted to cover today is using async await instead of regular your promise then. So this pattern, what we see on top is called JavaScript promise uh, pattern where you have some promise and then after that you have dot then function and you uh, sort of pass the response and deal with it. Now, so that is our first topic for today. Does this make sense? Thumbs up, thumbs down. The look that sounds good, guys. Or do you want me to re-explain? We good? So if no answers, then I'll move ahead and cover the second topic for the day. Is till this point, we have been calling the API using the uh, fetch function. Fetch is a built-in JavaScript function, but this function is not supported by many browsers. The Chrome browser that I'm using is supporting it, more standard way and more uniform way to do this is using something called third-party library. And the most famous library to do this kind of integrations. So these are sort of known as integration. We integrated our web page, our front end to a backend API, which is a Pokemon API. So we integrated our front end to this backend API. This kind of integrations are best handled by a library known as Axios, and it is a third party library. So to add any third party library in your application, you do is you go back to your terminal, either in VS Code or wherever you're using your terminal, and you do npm, then install, then don't leave empty anything here. You actually provide the library name. So we want to use Axios, so I'm giving Axios, and then hit enter. Let this finish. Hopefully it will finish today. So it says added 9 packages, and it added the package in our code. So how do we verify that the Axios that we wanted to use has been added? Well, we go to our package JSON and look for an object property named dependencies and see something called Axios was added. If you look at any other application that you might have had, which was created using white ecosystem, you would only see these two things. But now you see these things from uh, you see Axios as um, Axios has added to you. No, so now this is added, and if I go and just simply show what to be done, they'll be easier. But let's say you are new, then you can always go and look at how to use or npm, go to npm packages and go here and search for the package that you just installed, Axios, and you will see that it provides how to import the package and then how to use it as well. So if we see, it's saying to import it like this and then call the API. If you see, this is the exact same pattern that we are seeing in our code. Uh, is this pattern. Instead of fetch, all they have is axios.get. And this is the same pattern that we have in our code. And instead of doing it, instead of fetch, we are using axios. So let's simply do this. We will go here and we will now import the Axios. Let me restart our server that we had stopped. And instead of, so if I go to the Axios documentation, so, and this is a very critical step that you guys might want to consider, because I'll tell you very honestly, the sort of craft of being able to read the document and then form your code according to the documentation is slowly fading, but it is very critical. A lot of these things are getting now masked away by the chat GPTs and other large language models, but you still want to be in some sort of habit to be able to read the documentation and learn from there. So let's simply copy this. And now simply let's log the response. We will not even need to do this. This was another uh, sort of a requirement of using fetch, which was additional step. I know this will fail, but that's okay. Is you see, this is the response of an Axios call, and we directly have a data and headers and requests. So instead of needing to do this response, we can simply say response. We don't even need this, to be honest. But I'll keep it here so that once you guys actually let me keep everything here so you guys have both the versions. Once I post the code, you guys will have both the versions. Exit object. Let's put a comment here on top. And we don't even need this. And our code flow becomes even simpler. And the good part about Axios is it has the built-in error handling, So if for some reason API calls for failing, you'll be able to handle it easily. So now we see that Pokemon is showing here again. So we went from this code to this version, achieving the same set of response or same set of result. So if I were to ask you guys question, which version you think is easier for you to read and understand? What do you guys think? Any opinions? Maybe. That's good, so, Lena. It's not really bad of a choice, because it really helps you see the detailed detailed implementation of everything, and then sort of yeah, you're actually able to see all the nitty-gritties and all the executions, So that's not a bad choice, really. And you should be having that kind of opinion. What I have observed is most developers are preferring this one, and because it's easier to read and lesser lines. And beyond that, the major issue that Axios solves is any browser understands Axios. Instead of fetch, you need to be really careful. Maybe not all browsers will use, and we have cross-browser compatibility is very critical in the application. So that's topic number two. Any confusions on this? If not, I will be pushing this code and I will be naming this code in a way that you guys are able to follow. This is the same application that we built, and we built it in multiple ways. And I have the code as V1, V2, and probably I'll name this as the app Axios way or something so that you guys have. So the third and the final topic of the day is, you guys remember we have built forms in the past where we were having a form with an input box and a title, and then something was needing to be entered in the form. So let's just rebuild. So we have seen this kind of things in the past where we were adding the username and passwords and all those things. But till this point, we have never saved the form somewhere. But if you traditionally think, let's say maybe you're creating your new account on Amazon, you're providing your email, your name, your address, and everything. Amazon saves this information somewhere, and this information typically lives in databases. Now, your web page, your React application is not directly connected to database, and we have seen using either fetch or axios, we can get the data from the database. But instead, what we can do is we can save some information on the database as well. So when you click on submit, instead of just doing nothing, we actually send this information to database and then save it. So let's look at quick demo first, then we'll go over code. So let's say we are creating a new post, maybe new any social media post, LinkedIn post, my new post, and I have a cool idea about React. So this is your post body. We submit, we want to be able to save it somewhere. So we use something called a post API call. And if you see, we have till now been focusing on just the URL, but here something called post API call. So till now we have been getting something from API. Now we are sending something to the API. So sending something to the API is post, and we can make our forms persist the data beyond our browsers by doing such API call and sending the information that we just entered in input boxes to the API as a payload. Payload means a set of information that you want to save. So think of it as like maybe if you're creating a new account, your name, your email ID, your password, your address, all of those things are nothing but a payload or a set of information that you want to save to database. So we are saying this is the title of my post, which is whatever text we had entered, and this is my body, and save it to the database. Now, in theory, we would have had another API to get this information uh, from the database as well. Suppose, and let's see if I think it's not. So this placeholder API does not provide that, but you could get it something like this. So you could say, give me all the posts, and it give you the all the posts that were saved. So imagine this was saved by us. All of these posts were saved by us in database and like this, and then we retrieve it to display in our application. So how does the code for this work? Nothing fancy. This is our input box, which is an on-change handler that we have seen in the past. And when on-change handler is triggered, we set the form data. So we have created a form which has a title and body and user ID. And then we use, instead of doing nothing, we use same fetch API, fetch function to create the post and save the information to the API. And then we read back the response. And if response is not correct, something wrong happened, maybe something, let's say you missed something in the API and something wrong happened, we sort of throw the error. Title 1, 2, and body 1, 2, 3. It says error name not is also. This is the error that then that we sort of throw. Otherwise, if it's all successful, then we are good to go with this. We are good to go with this, and we can display this as well. I think style form dot messages, the Facebook that I need right now. I think that this has some issues with the color, but let's see. Fail to submit form, please try again. Let me. So because we made a mistake, we failed to submit the form, but let's say we were all good to go. Title 1212, body 1212. Success. The post created with ID 101. So this 101 came from the network call and the response. The response is something uh, that was sent to us. So this is quickly how we save the form data on the AAS server. Are you guys clear on this? If you guys are clear, then I will go a little deep and talk more in depth about the API and the integration. But these are the three main topics we needed to cover today. But I want to actually you guys to understand this whole API and the integration and the get and everything. So are you guys good with this? Thumbs up, thumbs down. All right, John. Thanks for confirming. So this is what textbook teaches. Textbook asks you to learn and do it for the homework purposes, right? But that is not really the uh, only thing that you guys need to understand. So I'll decide later. So think of this as, can I find a mobile? You are a user, then there lives this entity, which is nothing but something that is your APIs. The APIs are typically built in programming languages like Node.js, which I recommend you guys to learn once you guys have good hands on React, because you are already familiar with JavaScript, either Python, Java, and this one of the main responsibility of the APIs is to uh, communicate from 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 database to sort of this is your database where you have, let's say, your all the posts. So you have post one, post. So let's say you have two posts for now in your database, and you do a get call. So you do a get API call using either fetch or Axios. Does this make sense? Stop me if you guys are confused anywhere, because this is going to be so critical for you guys to understand when you actually go in real world and build the projects and actually perform the duties at a company, or maybe you open your own startup or anything, this is going to be so critical. What does get API call do is it goes from here and gives back all the posts. But this is not direct. This is going through this. This is the get API call. Gives back all the post 01, post 02. Similarly, let's say you want to create a new post. You want to create a new post. Select a little bigger. That actually. Mouse has given up on me. Okay. So you want to create a new post, create new post. You do a post API call, and what does that do is through this create, it creates a new post, which is, let's say, creates post 03. So now in our database, we will have, if I can get here, post 03. Now there is another, so we saw something called, let me put it here, get gets all posts, then what we saw was post creates a new post. And very similar to get and post, we have something called put. It can create, so typically put is used for creation, but post can uh, be also used for updation as well. So what do I mean by that? So let's say you had another post call like this, update post 02. Then that will what it will do is this call update post 02. So you guys see the magic. We are reading from database, we are adding into database, and we are updating to database all through API calls, which are done using either or Axios, fetch or Axios. Very similar to this, we have delete as well, which is very intuitive to understand. Just like create, delete a post. So you could have had a delete. I think we are running out of space. Uh, I will not display it here. But very similar to this, we could have had a delete post 01 and it will remove the post 01 from our database. So you, the actor who is on their browser in a window, is able to update the database via the APIs. Does this make sense? Because this is something you guys are going to be dealing a lot. Yes, Axios is far better option than Fetch. Axios is more compatible, and in fact, if you once you go to the real world, you will actually see Axios used in most places, not just React, but even in the Node.js as well. So what we just saw the diagram is something we know is integration diagram, and what these lines are API integration. So tomorrow, if you go in an interview and somebody is talking about integrations, they are talking about APIs, and these APIs are called, uh, sorry, these APIs are called nothing but REST APIs. You might have heard this word REST, and REST is made up of four words: get, post, put, delete, and these are the APIs that are typically known as REST. Another modern API that is coming up is GraphQL, but I highly encourage you guys to dive a little deeper in your free time, learn more about at least REST API calls, because still 99% projects or 95% projects are using REST for their integration to backend services, like which are typically written in Java or Node.js or Python, and which communicate to databases. GraphQL is upcoming and a lot of new projects are starting to use it. So it's good to know about GraphQL as well, but REST, you must know it. Even as a React developer who is primarily building the components and web pages, you must know REST API calling, at least using Axios very strongly. So